having fun here. We're going to have a good time today. I always look forward to this time. This is always a fun session. Let's see. I'm just making sure the microphone works. I've got a new webcam set up here. Let me make sure I'm coming in living color. Oh, let's see. It's cutting the top of my head off. All right, just a second. Here we go. All right. I would hate for you to miss my hair. I just got a haircut. Hey, Eric. Eric is here. Hey, we're going to get to your questions today. Today is the monthly live session for the Breath Club. Now, as I normally do, I'm going to apologize for not doing a weekly live on this channel. I am currently working on writing curriculum for multiple breathwork applications. So if you're not familiar with me, my name is Jesse Coomer, and I am a recovering college professor. And one of the things that I was really looking forward to not doing after leaving academia was writing curriculum. But it's in my blood. I can't help it. And so when you're a teacher, you just it's part of life, I guess. And so now I am working on writing some curriculum for a few different things when it comes to corporate health and when it comes to education. So we're trying to get breathwork into the world of education now. And so what that has done for me is it's made it so busy. It's made me so busy that it's difficult for me to reach out to this audience. And I really appreciate you being here today. We're gonna be answering some questions from the Breath Tribe. If you've not joined the Breath Tribe, this is my Patreon club. It started back in 2020. Do you remember 2020? What a crazy time, right? It doesn't feel like it feels like does it feel like it's been longer than 4 years? You tell me, how long does 20, or does it feel like, okay, that's exactly 4 years? I have a perfect chronology, a perfect handle on that. You let me know. But it feels like it's been a long time. But basically, our Patreon club started in 2020. As a breath worker, it was something that I couldn't do live sessions. So just imagine, and back then, almost everything that I did was deep breathwork sessions, heavy breathing, and that was not something that people could get around doing. It's not like, hey guys, let's get together, let's breathe really heavy. Actually, you know what? Okay, now that we're a few years after it, okay, so occasionally we did anyway, and so hey, but anyway, and there were some places that made us wear masks while we were doing superventilation. So if you're not familiar with superventilation, first of all, read my books. Let's see here, that one here, and then this one here. But basically, heavier breathing, deeper breathing sessions we were having to do. And it was kind of weird doing it with masks. But one place you didn't have to do that was at home. And so that's where the Breath Club started. And it has been going ever since. We have people from all over the world who get together. And actually, at the next hour, so after this broadcast, we're going to get together on a live Zoom session. I'm going to guide you through some breath work. And the cool thing about this Breath Club is that you get to sort of see what I'm experimenting with. I'm always experimenting with different breathing techniques, different sessions, different lengths. And I've been very fortunate to make friends with people who are researchers in this field, which is, it's been just really amazing being able to be mentored, especially by specifically one neuroscientist who he hasn't gotten sick of my incessant questions over and over again. And I don't understand, help me understand. And so it's been a really wild journey. Nowadays, I am on the 4th class of the Language of Breath certification program. We are growing, and it's because we're not looking at breath the same way like whenever I first started, where you just had this one, Wim Hof method, or you had oxygen advantage, or you had holotropic breath work, or this or that. What we're doing is we're taking all the principles, the foundational principles of how breath interfaces with your physiology and your psychology. And I had to study with the gurus, I had to work with the gurus, and then pull what they did and apply science and what we call synthesis in the world of research. I had to synthesize different elements of the research to say, okay, this is actually what's working. This is what we're doing. And you can apply these principles and you can help as any kind of person you want to with breath. So one of my biggest groups that I'm working with right now are therapists, because there is a lot that we can do for people who are suffering from trauma and from anxiety and a lot of these issues of the modern world. But it's not this mechanistic thing where it's just do this technique, right? You have to understand the research that we have was done under mostly clinical situations, and life is not in a clinic. Life is not under a clinical situation all the time. So what we do is we apply what we know, and we get amazing results. So if that's something you're interested in learning and maybe sharing, first of all, I want you to know that the Black Friday sale for the Language of the Language of Breath online course, if you're on my email list, that is coming out very soon. It's $300 off our premium course. Normally it's $799. It's going to be on sale for $499. If you're in the Breath Club on Patreon, you already have access to this. So it's a fantastic way to learn a lot of the foundational elements of the language of breath. And then in addition to that, if you would like to coach people, we go super deep in how to actually reach people and how to become a breath generalist and also a specialist. So the beauty is once you understand these foundational principles and you start to apply them to yourself, you can apply them to anybody, you can actually you can provide elite breath training for athletes. You can provide amazing things for your clients if you're a physical therapist, a mental health therapist. And basically if you would like to hear from my students, they would all love to talk to you, actually. So and that's something that I'm really proud of. It's something I couldn't always say when I was working in academia in the college setting, because I couldn't actually write my own curriculum all the time. But I am writing the curriculum for the Language of Breath Breathworker School, and we have fantastic faculty to back me up. So it's that is, if you take a look at jessecoomer.com or languageofbreathcollective.com, you can find out more about that. But today, my friends, we are answering questions for people in the Breath Club. Oh, one last thing. Or I guess two last things. I promise they'll be quick. One, if you would like to go with me and James Stewart to Sand Valley and do our winter retreat in Sand Valley Resort in Wisconsin, we're talking gourmet food. We're talking luxury place. Snow. It's always snow. It's always like, I don't know. It's this weird vortex where in January, it's always covered under like half a foot of snow. It's a winter wonderland. We do sauna tent villages. We do contrast therapy, deep breath work. This is where one of the very few places where I will guide people through DMT breath work. And this is also a place where we cut holes in the lake. We build with those, the ice is so thick that we get to build a throne, and you get to sit on the throne after you finish your ice dip. I'm like, it really is. I would say it's a once in a lifetime thing, but every year people come back over. Like, we've got people who've come back like 4 times. We've been doing this for years. It is our signature event. It gets better every year. So go to jessecoomer.com if you're looking for that. Tomorrow is the last day of the early bird pricing. It's absolutely worth full price, but tomorrow, if you want to get in on it, by tomorrow's the last day for early bird. Also, if you're looking to go, you might have heard of Mike Mayer of Take a Deep Breath. He and I have been having a lot of fun. We're both dads. We're both breath workers. And we both have been having a lot of fun just kind of in the back channels. And we've really developed a friendship. And I got to say, Mike, if you're watching this, Mike, why would you be watching? You got such a way bigger channel. But he's been a hell of a good friend lately. And we've been saying, you know what, we really need to do something. So we are going to go to Costa Rica next year in early July. So for a whole week, we are doing a Costa Rica breath-focused retreat. And this one, there's a lot of themes like transformation, like step into yourself, reclaiming your masculinity or whatever. Ours, okay, and it came after like, what should our theme be? And then we started saying, dad jokes and like fart jokes and things. And we're like, why not just have fun? Why not make our theme breath work and fun? And so in addition to breath work, we're also going to be doing squirt gun fights, dad joke telling contests, maybe even karaoke. I don't know. Mike is not so sure he wants to do karaoke. I'm kind of a big karaoke guy. That's how I met my wife. Should I admit that? Should I admit that to the public? I don't know. I don't know if my wife wants me to tell you that. Hey, Eric, Paul, Dana, good to see you guys. It's nice to have you here. Happy Thursday. Let's get into some Q&A. I have 3 questions this month. And just so you guys know, if you're part of the Patreon club, if you join the gold tier or higher, you get access to the Ask Me Anything function, or function or ask me anything tier. Basically, you get to, if you want me to talk about something, I will talk about it. And that can be anything. Fortunately, I mean, I guess I will reserve the right to not talk about it if it's like inappropriate or something like that. But I will try. I will try to skate that line for you. So, John, good to see you here. Good to see everybody here. So today, fortunately, I guess I didn't get any inappropriate things today, but I did get some really cool questions. One of them pertaining to what is the purpose of fear. Stephanie from Germany actually reached out about this one because she read my book and and in my book, The Language of Breath, which is, let's see, this one right here. Actually, I have it down here. So The Language of Breath, this one here. And if you're certifying with The Language of Breath, you have to read this book. This is sort of like the basic principles of The Language of Breath. I talk about the biological function of emotions, where a lot of times people think, well, emotions are sort of just these things, and it's just part of being human. It's kind of a side effect of being human. And like science fiction movies, you see like, oh, emotion is, they'll try to link it to things like that. The funny thing is, there actually are biological reasons for emotions to exist, and they are very important. So we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Vaden, are you still taking questions? If you're in the Patreon club and you're in the gold tier or higher, just go. You know what? Go ahead and ask a question in the Patreon club. I'll get the notification and I will read it. If you're not part of the Patreon club and you want to ask a question, seriously, dude, it would be so much better for you to join the Patreon club. So the gold club is a $20 a month tier. And so you could do a $20 thing here, or you could join, or you could just join and just join for the $5 and then see how awesome it is and go from there. Whatever you want to do. I'm going to see if I can maybe get to some questions after a minute, but I have 3 really good questions. The first one. So here's the thing, Eric, I want to thank you first and foremost, because what happens is nobody ever puts the question like out in front of everybody else to read. This is a little, and hey, I'm not complaining, but it is one of those things where I post this thing in the Patreon club. And so the way it is, like, you can put your question underneath. And my dream was that people would put their questions underneath, and then other people would be like, yeah, I always wondered that. Oh, cool. I'm glad someone else is asking that question. Or maybe you would add to those. Hint, hint. But what most of the time people do, and this is okay, a lot of times these are sort of personal questions, and I don't actually read exactly what you write on air, just so you know, because I do want to preserve your privacy if it's a private question. We did have one about testosterone today. We didn't really have any. We've had some about that were a little bit more personal, and I just want to preserve your privacy. And I know sometimes people with their Patreon clubs, they'll say your full name and stuff like that. I do your first name and maybe sometimes where you're from, and I just want you to have your privacy too. So it's just something I do, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should say, maybe I should get your address. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. Let's get into it. I'm going to go for Eric's first because Eric did put his on the comments. Eric, you're having trouble with your cold training process. Okay, so let's talk cold training. Many of you know that I've been in the cold training world for a long time. My first teacher back in the day was Wim Hof. I worked with him for quite some time. And, after a while, I started going my own way. And basically, the research that I have found, I use cold in a different way than I used to use it whenever I was in the Hof world. And there's a lot of crossover. So there's a lot of things I do that are same as what they do. But when it comes to cold training, the primary thing that I use cold training for, especially in the language of breath, is the psychological benefits of cold training. So the biggest benefit when I don't care what you're looking at, all these different benefits, I do believe is the psychological benefit. And a lot of people act like, well, that's not good enough. And here's the thing, I don't think I would have started getting into cold training if it only was psychological. And just think about that. If it was just psychological and there were no other benefits to cold training, maybe you wouldn't have gotten into cold training either. But there are other benefits to cold training. A lot of these benefits, though, that we used to think were there or maybe overstated or exaggerated, but there are some things that we know for sure. One, cold training does stimulate the nervous system in a way that creates a sympathetic dominant state. When you're in a sympathetic dominant state, you're producing stress hormones. One of those stress hormones is norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is one of the strongest anti-inflammatories that you can endogenously produce, and that's just a fancy word for produce it yourself as opposed to injecting or taking a pill. So if you're looking for a way to reduce your inflammation, norepinephrine is the strongest anti-inflammatory that you can produce. Now, norepinephrine also does other things, right? It's responsible for a whole host of things. One of those things is that it increases attentiveness. Now, a lot of people think, well, if it increases attentiveness, I want as much as I can. Hey, it makes me more attentive and it reduces inflammation. Yeah, just give me a gallon of that, or I'm just going to chug it all day, or if I don't know if it's a drink. Obviously, I wouldn't. I don't think we should try to drink norepinephrine, but that's not really true either, because when we have an abundance of norepinephrine or an imbalance of norepinephrine, we have difficulties with our focus and we feel anxiety. So one of the beauties, though, of doing cold training is that you get a dose of norepinephrine every single time you get in there. And it seems to be, based on the literature, the same every time you get in. So if it's your first time or your 50th time, according to the research that's been done, it seems as though the norepinephrine boost is approximately the same. So this is one of the reasons why I say one of the most obvious biological benefits is anti-inflammation. And when we use it for in whole body therapy, and it doesn't have to be on your head, but it should be everything below the neck, we get to take advantage of what we call a global release of norepinephrine from your locus coeruleus. I'm saying a lot of multi I'm saying a lot of multi syllable words. So bear with me. There will not be a quiz, and God knows I do not want to have a spelling test. Uh, but basically, this is the truth, right? This is the science. So that's one of the biological benefits that keeps me coming back time and time again. The other is the benefits when it comes to an improved immune response. Now, there's a lot of conflicting data here. There's a lot of like parsing and putting things together and trying to put things together. But overall, I would say when you combine anecdotal evidence from people who do this regularly, plus the data that we can say that there must be some kind of improvement to the overall immune function. That doesn't mean you're not going to catch colds. And, that was what I believed back in the Hoff days. I thought, well, I just never get sick again. I mean, if you looked at a lot of the interviews, especially, anything in the first like 5 years, it was do this and never get sick again. Every time there was an interview. And I remember catching my first cold, I was like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? It must be me. And so a person shouldn't think, hey, just because I'm doing cold training or breath work or anything like that, I'm just never going to get sick again. It's natural. There's a natural response, the secondary immune function. I mean, there's a natural response. And there are times when you will catch a cold. And I talk about this in my most recent book, A Practical Guide to Cold Training, that it is also something that happens more often when we are in the cold. So and this is because the structure of a virus is more secure when it's cold out. So when it's hot, viruses don't have as much protection from, there's this thing called the envelope or the envelope, and that becomes more malleable whenever we get the virus gets warm. And so it becomes easier to destroy the virus DNA. And so or the genetic material, it's not necessarily DNA, but the point is it destroys that easier when it's cold. It doesn't destroy it as easy. So there are some things, those are the two biggest biological benefits, but the psychological benefit of doing something difficult, seeing yourself do that thing difficult, that is the primary thing. And in the language of breath, when we train our breath workers, not everybody wants to get into the cold. Not everybody wants to train people in baths, ice baths, and things like that. But we do provide guidance on that, on the safety elements. And the primary focus is on the psychological element. Now, having said all of that, this question comes down to a psychological thing because Eric is saying, hey, listen, first of all, I'm not really consistent, right? Eric is saying, I'm not really consistent in my cold training. I am not, I try to be consistent, but I'm not that consistent. And it seems as though, according to Eric, he says, basically this seems to make it harder when I do get into the cold to endure it and to make it happen, right? And so this is something that I would say you're not alone, and this is something that a lot of people experience. I will also say that a lot of people who are very consistent don't find it any easier just because they're consistent. And a lot of people will white knuckle it and grit their teeth and get into the cold because they say, well, it's good for me, so I've got to do it. And that's not necessarily a better way to do it. So Eric, what I would say is, first of all, when we do cold training, like the time of day, that's going to affect how easy or how difficult it is to get into the cold. What you've been doing physically is going to affect it. The degree of stress that you're under currently and during the times that you're trying to get in, that's going to affect it. A lot of people do cold exposure therapy as a way to mitigate stress. They're trying to break through stress. I used to call cold training forced meditation because it's very difficult to let your thoughts wander in an ice bath or in a cold shower. I guess I still do sometimes call it that. I don't like saying it that way anymore because I feel like it's better to not just go blank. I feel like it's a better practice to really focus on the physical sensations when you're in the cold, and that's actually what my advice would be to you, Eric. So what happens a lot of times is people will get into the cold. It's really, oh my God, and you have to understand, we are built for this. It is a natural reaction to the feeling of cold to not like that feeling. Your hypothalamus is like, it's basically, and I hate using this word because I always hate the metaphor that we got this computer and then we're a machine. Read my book, Language of Breath, and you'll know why. But I'll say it, we're programmed. There is a program in the hypothalamus that says, okay, we need to get out of the cold. Here are some strategies that all humans know as soon as they're born. And this is why people wear coats between getting out of their car and going into the building they parked right next to. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's not like you're going to die of hypothermia. It's just a little uncomfortable. But the hypothalamus is saying, hey, this is a deadly force. And so we need to be cautious and aware of that. And so that's what happens. So one of the things I would recommend is when we focus on the feeling of the cold, and this can be on a lot of things. This can be on literally just pain in itself. But when we focus on what that feeling is and we really allow ourselves to feel it, what you're going to notice is that it isn't quite as bad. A lot of the challenge of cold training is the boogeyman that it becomes psychologically. And so when you get into the cold shower, when you get into the cold plunge, whatever it is you're doing, I actually think, Eric, you were saying you were doing a cold plunge with a chiller, which, hey, that's an investment, man. You got to use that. I've got a chiller on my cold plunge as well. I'm about to not have to use it right now. I just recently moved to Chicago. So I'm in the Chicago area. I'm kind of in the suburbs. So I do have a backyard, and I'm just going to fill up the horse trough now and just get into it now. But during the summertime, a chiller is really helpful. Well, here's the thing. Your inconsistency, I would say, is not necessarily the problem. I would say check your stress levels when you're getting in. If you're super stressed, it's not necessarily the best thing to do to get into an ice bath. If you're caffeinated, I don't know how what your relationship is to coffee or what your timing is. A lot of times when we maybe are super caffeinated or maybe we're stressed out, getting into an ice bath can feel more difficult just because you are adding a stressor on top of another stressor. And in many cases, that for some of us, or at least and I'm in this camp, if I'm under a lot of stress, I will treat myself to a hot shower. Okay. Oh my God, I said it. I admitted it. Oh my God, and I still am just fine with cold training. I still get into ice baths and things like that. It's just that one of the things we have to do is we have to be really mindful of the amount of stress that we're putting on ourselves in the day. So don't worry so much about, okay, I got to do it every day, but definitely think about it. Okay, is today a good day? Is now a good time? Many people do it in the morning. And one of the things that I'm actually going to be making a YouTube video about this because I'm going to try this. Here's a confession. I don't like doing cold exposures in the morning. Okay. Can somebody, okay, let me know who does cold exposures in the morning. Paul, are you doing, or Lou, are you doing it? Hey, by the way, good to have you here. No, exactly. I hate cold exposures in the morning. Now, does that mean, okay, so Eric is trying, okay, he's usually doing in the morning. So here's my advice to you, Eric. Try it in the evening. Try it after exercise. Try it in a time when you feel strong. Let's see. Cycling DNA says I do a cold shower when I wake up after some breath work. Okay, and here's the thing: there are certain times you're going to be feeling more called to do it, and that might be the best thing. Now, let me tell you this. Early on in my cold training career, I felt like I needed to train every single day, never take a day off. This was not necessarily a healthy way to look at it, but that was my life for at least 4 years. At least 4 years in a row, I cold trained every day with very few exceptions. Maybe when I caught a cold or something like that, I wouldn't cold train, but man, I was there if I could be. And I would try to do it in the morning sometimes, and maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I made the commitment that every day I was going to do it. So what would happen is it would get to be 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh geez, I haven't done my cold training for the day. So I was like, well, I guess I have to do it now. So I started doing it at night, and I found it to be much easier. And then whenever occasionally I would do it in the morning, I was already well adapted. My physiology had adapted, and so cold training wasn't so hard. The thing that I will say when it comes to morning exertion, and this can be exercise, this can be cold training, morning exertion seems to reset our stress threshold. So it's the whole point, like the old quote from Mark Twain about eating a frog first thing in the morning, nothing the rest of the day is going to be so bad. That seems to be true. And it seems to be if you can push yourself with exertion early on, the rest of the day, like does the stressors that come up the rest of the day aren't going to be so stressful. So those are some words of advice for you, Eric. Now, your big question was, is it the fact that you're not being consistent? Is that what's causing it to be so hard? And I think I already talked about this, but I'll just say it again. I don't think that's it, unless it's like you're only practicing like once a month or like once every other month, something like that. But if you have a chiller, I think you're a little bit more dedicated than that. I would say you're probably trying to get in maybe a few times a week. And well, hey, you're here right now. So if you're here still, I mean, let me know. But the thing is, what happens is sometimes we say it has to be this way. It has to be this way. It has to be at this time. And we should feel a little bit more free to kind of let it ebb and flow. So, I'll skip the frog and just do some morning breath work, says John. Hey, no worries there, man. Eric says many days in a row, even weeks, then for weeks, then none for weeks, etc. So you'll go really hard and heavy, and then you'll drop it off. Well, you're not alone there either. And here's the thing: sometimes taking an ice bath is the wrong thing to do, and a lot of the time it has to do with the degree of stress you're under. So you're again, in my book, a practical guide to cold training, I talk about listening to your inner voice. Now, there's one part of your inner voice, that's the hypothalamus, and it's saying, don't you dare get into that cold because it's going to kill you, right? And that's the voice that we're trying to work with, saying, hey, thank you so much for trying to keep me safe. But guess what? We're a lot safer than maybe we feel sometimes. And that's where we build that mental resilience. The other voice, though, is the one that literally we do need to listen to. And that's the one where it takes a little bit more time. In the language of breath, we really focus on that. That's the voice of the unconscious you, your emotions, your stress level, all of those things. And you can start to develop a felt sense for this. And quite literally, it will manifest in physical sensations that you can say, okay, now is not the time. Even, I've done I've done interviews with world record holders and people who broke world records. Like for instance, Joseph Kobrel, he broke Wim Hof's record twice. He himself, he says, hey, there's going to be some days you just, you get in and then you just get out, right? And that was that, and there's going to be some days you can just go and go and go. And he talks a lot about how you eat. So your diet makes a big difference, how you sleep, and all those things we know, right? And if you think about what I was just saying, it's the degree of stress that we're carrying. It's how we are treating ourselves, and that's going to make you usually stronger or weaker in the cold. So I want to just encourage you, Eric. You're doing great. Stick with it. Don't get down on yourself. You were a little down on yourself in your message, but don't get down on yourself. This whole group here on the right of the screen, they're here with you. And we're all cheering you on. So thank you so much for that question. And hey, if I missed anything, Eric, you just let me know. I am so happy. Thank you, Professor Yuzak. I appreciate you a ton. Thanks so much. All right. So let's see here. The next question came from Ryan, and he was asking about breath work that might improve testosterone. He was asking specifically because he had heard in some interviews that doing heavy, like the super ventilation style breath work, specifically also the kinds that do long breath holds, so like the Wim Hof method, or basically what the Wim Hof method is. It's pranayama. It's been around for thousands of years. It's called it's called Bhastrika Kumbhaka pranayama. Basically over breathing, holding your breath for long periods of time, becoming hypoxic in some cases. And he was like, I've heard that was really good for testosterone. Can you help me out? Is that true? And if it's not true, what is good for testosterone? Well, here's the thing. That is one of those, it's sort of a misnomer. And the biggest reason why people believe that to be something that's good for your testosterone is because it makes you feel energy. And you feel like, wow, this energy must be like, it must be, man, I'm definitely boosting my testosterone here, putting the lead in my pencil, as my friend James Stewart likes to say. And you get this cool feeling and you feel confident, and that's awesome. But ultimately, if you're looking for ways to improve your overall testosterone, you're looking for ways to reduce your stress levels, and you're going to want to do that throughout the day. And there are practices that you can do to increase your ability to deal with stress. So the better you're sleeping, the better you're eating, the more relaxed you can stay throughout the day. So some techniques that are pretty common, so some of the ones that are out there. Now, in the language of breath, we use these techniques, but we add extra elements to make them more effective. But one of the things you may have heard of is heart resonance frequency breathing. And if you're and Ryan, you are in the breath club. If you're here, Ryan, let me know. But you're in the breath club. So in the breath club, we have these heart resonance frequency breathing sessions that are specifically designed through using the language of breath, the science that we understand with sustained interoceptive awareness. They're specifically designed to be a lot more effective in improving heart rate variability and your ability to stay calm, and overall just your ability to sense when you are not calm. And so what we want to try to do is we want to try to remain calm. And in doing so, we're going to reduce our cortisol. We're going to reduce a lot of our stress hormones. And when that happens, it's very good for your testosterone levels. Okay. And this is something that I experienced myself when I stopped doing hyperventilation breath work every morning. So I know it's one of those things you kind of look forward to when you wake up. It's like, hey, I guess what I get to do now? I get to, get high on my own supply. Right. But I stopped doing that. And when I stopped doing that, my testosterone went up by about 100 points. And that was awesome. And so I'm like, okay. So, and I was feeling better throughout the day, and I had a greater even keel. So one of the things I would recommend to you, and it's so simple and it's kind of boring. So not a lot of people want to do it, but a lot of times it's these boring things that actually lead to the greatest benefits. What my suggestion is, do 5-5 breathing, 5 in, 5 out, steady, 5 in, 5 out, and do that every morning for about 10 minutes, and then do it every evening for about 10 minutes. Something very simple like that. If you want to enhance that, take a look in the Patreon club. We have a few different sessions specifically designed for this, and we add the element of interoceptive awareness. and you're going to find that you're sleeping better. You're waking up more refreshed. You're staying calm better. Your flexibility in your nervous system is going to improve. We call this HRV, right? So our HRV can improve. All of those things have a positive effect on your hormones. I wouldn't say just hormones in general. All of those things are going to have a positive effect on the hormones that you're looking to improve, the testosterone levels, because our ability to sleep well, eat well, make good decisions for our lives, it's all interdependent, right? So it's not just the breathing technique you're looking for. You're looking for something to enhance your decisions every single part of the day, enhance the sleep that you have, enhance the eating and digesting that you do. You obviously don't go out and just eat, Big Macs and cheeseburgers. You're going to want to really think about your life in a holistic way. There's no specific technique that's like, okay, whenever you start breathing this way, your body starts producing more testosterone. And I think sometimes people believe that. So I'm glad you reached out on this, Ryan. Again, something that is going to enhance your ability to stay calm. That's what you're looking for. Let's see here. So good sleep. Absolutely. Paul, let's see here. Yeah, Paul. Okay. Going back to the cold thing. Yeah. Intuitive plunging. I love that. That's a great term. That was the only thing you changed to get the 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and that's an interesting question there, Paul. I just for full transparency, with when I started doing that, so I had already taken, I still take, certain supplements like adaptogens, things like that. So those things I had already started, and I'd already taken NMN. So one of the things you might know about this channel is I've taken NMN, and that caused a huge increase in my, well, not huge. Well, it was a pretty big increase. It was more than 100 points on my testosterone, and that was from the age 40 to 42. And then what happened was earlier this year, I was still doing, a lot of times I would do mixed sessions when I woke up. And then earlier this year, maybe it was late last year, I got this terrible sinus infection and I couldn't do superventilated breath work. I don't do it through the mouth. Okay, that sounded terrible. But I don't do hyperventilative breath work with my mouth, unless I just have to, and I just didn't really want to. So I when I do hyperventilative breath work, I do it nasal, and so I couldn't do that. So I started I'm just going to do slow breath work. I'm just going to do the other stuff, the stuff that I've known for so long that I should have been doing. It's kind of like starting to eat my vegetables again. And that's when I noticed over this past year. I just recently took a testosterone test, just not too long ago. It was like about a month ago. So, and that's whenever I noticed the bump. So I'm looking good. I'm looking good. And I wasn't bad. I would say the testosterone wasn't bad. But, this has been a really stressful year. I just recently moved to Chicago. I mean, there's been a lot of crazy things going on. So I know that so other than that change in my daily routine, I mean, there's been a lot of things. It's difficult. I would say, Paul, it is difficult. And Ryan, of course, it's difficult to pinpoint it down to one thing, but that's the thing that I will say that change. I have seen other changes, like for instance, my time to exhale has increased by insane amounts. So those are all other indicators that my ability to deal with stress is better. My HRV is much higher now. So great questions. Let's see. Yeah, John, you've done the heart resonance frequency breathing session. I mean, it really is amazing. 5-5, even if you're not using the language of breath stuff, like even if you're not doing that, just literally doing 5-5. Hell, start now. Start literally while we're talking, and see, and you'll notice over time. This is something that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's been written on it. We know a lot about this technique, and a lot about the effect that it can have on your autonomic nervous system. Last question comes down to, what is the benefit of fear? Says Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie, for this question. Now, fear does have a lot of benefits. And I think I love how the question was positioned, right? Because we don't want to have fear in our lives. We don't want to act in fear. We know that when we act in fear, a lot of times we do the worst possible thing. And for instance, I always talk about my dog, and Eric, you're a dog guy, when a dog, my dog, he's sitting up here, he's like 1,000 years old, but whenever he gets scared or something like this happens, and of course we moved from a very rural place, like a place that a very small town, very quiet. And so whenever something loud would happen, he would just get up and then he would like run into the wall, right? And maybe you've done that. Maybe I've done that. We make a lot of stupid choices under fear. And of course, we all can quote the Dune quote, fear is the mind killer. And it's not wrong when you say that, because what happens is when we're afraid, this activates our autonomic nervous system in a way that we become more sympathetic dominant, sometimes in a major way where we just completely shut down. Polyvagal theory, we would say that we would have a dorsal vagal response, which can completely just shut us down. But we also know that fear is a great motivator, right? And so if you want to, what's funny is I train a lot of athletes. This summer was a great summer for athletes, and I would always tell them, if I want to make you be able to run at your fastest, I have two ways of doing that. One is to make you fear for your life, right? And if you want to see me sprint, I have a terrible gait. Like there, so here's a little something. So I paid a videographer to. I'm working on this challenge. I started it last year. It's called the Organism of Action. This is it's basically all about decision making. It's all about decision making. And there's this challenge where you run up and down a hill with a medicine ball or some kind of a weighted something. You run up and down as many times. And I look so stupid in this video. I paid good money for this video. I'm like, hey man, can you just like make it look like I look good when I run? My gait is terrible. I am an awful runner. But if you want to see me run as fast as I can possibly run, you make me fear for my life, right? And I tell that to my athletes. I can either put a gun to your head and make you feel like you're about to die if you don't run as fast as you can, or I can make you feel as safe as you can. I can make you feel safe enough to push yourself beyond your perceived limits, right? And it's a lot harder to do that, but it's possible. Now, fear, and I see it down here, survival, right? Fear is great for putting us into a very hyper-aware state, right? If you're afraid, your senses become more sensitive, and you are more likely to be able to run fast. You're more likely to have more agile and quick reflexes. You're going to be more not maybe necessarily more nimble, maybe not necessarily more dexterous, but you're going to have more energy. And so fear is a fantastic motivation for your organism in the act of survival. So Stephanie, while it sucks to be afraid and it tends to lead us into the dumbest possible decision, oftentimes fear is that motivator that puts us over the edge. And for our ancestors, maybe not for us so much today, but for our ancestors, fear can be the thing, or at least was the thing that kept us alive. So I'm going to check to see. I'm not sure. Let's see here. We had Vadant. I'm not sure if you were able to ask a question. Just checking to see if you were able to ask any questions. Doesn't look like it. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe. Let's see here. Nope, doesn't look like you asked a question. So, but thank you anyway for being here, guys. This is a monthly thing, but I'm trying to get back into the process of doing this weekly. This week I'm talking. Actually, last week I talked about NMN. So NMN has been, going back to the testosterone thing. That's been a big thing. I'm turning 44 this year. I'm turning 44, right? That used to feel like it was a really old age, but now it's just like, I wonder when I will feel like a grown up. Um, I want to thank everybody for being here. And if you haven't joined the Patreon club, $5 gets you an entire month of access to my whole catalog. It also gets you into the thing we're about to do in about 15 minutes, which is meet up on Zoom. It's the price of a cup of coffee, and it keeps me going. It keeps the Patreon club alive. If you haven't joined yet, hey, give us a shot. We're pretty awesome people. You can tell just by these amazing questions and the awesome comments that you've seen here today. We've got a lot of great people here. And if you're not a part of it, hey, join us. Another thing that Patreon members get access to right now, you have access to the merch. Okay, so I've been talking about getting merch for Language of Breath for a long time. I have finally secured merch. And right now, if you're in the Patreon club, there is a link in there so you can get it for wholesale price. It's quite literally the same price that it cost me to produce it. That's the price it is in the Patreon club right now for you to purchase it. So we got hats, we got hoodies, we've got all these things, and they are at wholesale prices. I'm not saying it's cheap, okay, because this is one of those companies where they print one at a time. Like if you purchase like 1,000 at a time, then it's pretty cheap to do wholesale. But this is like one at a time, so it's still like $20 or something like that. But the thing is, you know how expensive these things can get. Like if you go to other shops, like these things would go for like 40 or $50. So it's pretty cheap compared to what you'll pay later on whenever I have to actually raise the price. Eventually, I'll be raising the price. I'm not going to raise it like by a whole bunch, because the whole point of the merch is just to make enough to support the channel, just to make enough to pay for the website and keep this thing going. And so the Patreon club, however, the Patreon club is a fantastic. It is a fantastic club, even for a lot of other reasons. But right now, again, you also have access to the Language of Breath online course for just $4.99, which is our Black Friday deal. This is the biggest discount that you can possibly ever get. It is ridiculously cheap for what this course is. It is a premium course. Like I'm really proud of it. It took a long time to produce, and there's really nothing else out there that competes with it. And the things that I've seen for like $1,200, $1,500, $1,600, they don't even compete with it. So I'm really proud of it. And I'm one of those humble Midwestern boys. So I wouldn't say these things unless I really felt very proud. So guys, I want to thank you for being here. If you're not in the Breath Club, go join. It's just go to patreon.com/Midwestern Method. It's the last vestige. That's the last thing I kept of Midwestern Method. Maybe I'll bring it back. Oh, looks like I'm getting the notifications. People are trying to join the Zoom. So I'm going to go over to the Zoom here in just a little bit. And we've got new music. And I've been experimenting with I've been going old school with these new experiments. So we're going to do some experimentation today in this breathwork session. Guys, thanks so much. Have a great month. And I will see you. If you're in the Breath Club, I'll see you in just about 10 minutes. All right, see you there.